Welcome to the STEM Pathways podcast, where we delve into the fascinating world of science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm your host, Rohan Sharma, a passionate explorer of all things STEM. Each episode, we bring you captivating stories, cutting edge research, and inspiring interviews with experts and enthusiasts for pushing the boundaries of innovation. Whether you're a student, a professional, or just curious about how the world works, join us as we unlock the mysteries of the universe and explore the endless possibilities of STEM. Let's get started. Today, I'll be interviewing Dennis Wu, who holds a master's in electrical and electronics engineering from Stanford. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. So, to start off, I wanted to ask what made you choose your major of electrical and electronics engineering for your bachelor's degree?
Yeah. So I actually did my bachelor's degree back in Taiwan, and it was the National Tsinghua University, and it was like an engineering heavy university. And like the educational system in Taiwan is actually different from what in the US, where you can try out different programs. In high school, where we are forced kind of to choose at an earlier stage, where we don't actually know like what departments are like, and then what career path we're gonna choose. So it's kind of difficult. It's based on like what's popular and the grades, for example. If you get good grades, you can choose like the popular ones first. So it's like either you go into like biomedical stuff or you do engineering stuff, which is also popular in Taiwan. And that's how most of the people chose it. And then you go to college, you figure it out, and if you're lucky enough, you like it, and you stick with it. And I think that's the case for me, where I was lucky enough, and I knew that I want to do something that's hands-on and biomedical stuff. I was interested in it, but somehow like it didn't strike a chord. So I decided to just like do engineering as a starter. And then I did my master's here in the US, also doing electrical engineering. So that's kind of like the story.
Yeah. So, what was your experience like while getting your bachelor's?
I think bachelor's wise, I think one of the most important experiences, like first you start with all the theoretical classes, especially if you're engineering focused. But I think the first like freshman year, sophomore year, when you're learning all those courses and you're doing all the calculations, all that stuff, sometimes you lose yourself into like you're not familiar with like the endpoint applications of those courses. And so if there were somebody that kind of like were there and remind you that, hey, like the things that you're learning right now is actually really useful in the future, if you want to do certain fields, because they're the like for example, electrical engineering itself is like a vast field of like different tracks. And so if you want to do more on the software side, if you do on more on the hardware side, if you see the endpoint application, I think it'll help earlier in the career, um, earlier in your education to actually figure out what you're actually learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, after getting your bachelor's, what made you decide to go and get a master's? And what was the
So
experience like when you're applying to schools here in the US?
so I'd say like internship was an important role. Like during my bachelor's degree, I did an internship in the Taiwan Science Park in one of the companies, and then I didn't quite like the culture uh, in terms of like the traditional Asian tech company kind of thing. So I wanted to explore more. And there was another senior that came back. He was studying PhD in the US, also in Stanford. And he was sharing his experiences in terms of how the US educational system was like and what he learned, and how Silicon Valley actually inspired him. So I think that was like a good starting point for me to like, oh, maybe I can try this as well. And so I applied at the end of my third year, and after like we have to do like military service and stuff, and then so after that I came to the US.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was it like being at Stanford and like suddenly being there from a whole different country?
Oh yeah, like I remember like the first day I arrived, I was super jet lagged, and it was really tough mentally, because you don't actually know like what you're signing up for. And then I think the thing that helped is that people were welcoming, and Stanford had a bunch of different classes that you can choose from. The freedom of choice is actually one of the big offers that kind of like draw me into Stanford as well. And I think the most important thing back then was machine learning and AI stuff was just starting to take popularity. And so it was actually pretty exciting to see like all these fields in full steam, and you're able to just like walk into classes as well if you're interested. And there are also a bunch of like the tech people from the industry coming into classes or like career fairs and whatnot. So I think it was really exciting at the same time, while trying to adjust to the culture here, coming to the US for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one kind of random question I had. I saw you had a pretty good GPA when you were in college.
Uh,
Do you have any advice around studying and keeping up with classes?
I think that's a good question. Like, I wouldn't say like GPA is like the only thing that you should look out for, because college, you need to also spend time to do something else. Whether you want to do courses in other departments or you want to do like clubs and all that stuff, to expand your horizon and try different things. But like GPA wise, I think at least the major courses in your department and they're considered the core learnings. Just make sure that you're paying attention to it. And funny enough, my year was like the first or second year that our college actually got into the GPA system. So everybody was also trying to just figure it out. And it was actually good because the professors actually were pretty adaptive to the system. And we actually learned that the GPA system was kind of better than the traditional grading system as well. And the courses was more oriented toward project based at the end, which was also helpful in terms of like actually applying your learnings, rather than just like doing the question answers,
Yeah.
those kind of stuff. Yeah.
Was the original system just like a percent, like out of 100?
Yeah, out of 100, and then it's more, there's less flexibility, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So after getting your master's, what was your first job?
So I started at Google, and I was fortunate because back then I think it was 2016, 17, software was more popular, and to my surprise, hardware opportunities were significantly less than software. So I actually had a hard time looking for a job. I landed a Google internship in the Pixel team. That was my first experience in the industry. And then I got a return offer, and my first job was actually doing the video conferencing system like we're using. And we're developing all the hardware, like the camera systems and speaker systems in the meeting room. So that was my first job at Google.
Yeah. And coming out of a university like Stanford and being right in Silicon Valley, how did that help when trying to find jobs?
So I would say it's a blessing and a curse. Like, you have this assumption of like, oh, this is actually a relatively good school, and so people would naturally try to like reach out to you, and it'll be like smooth sailing after you gain your degree and all that stuff. But actually, it's not. It depends on the industry, and I think it was mostly software back then, so a lot of rejections. I still need to hand out a lot of CVs, and the opportunities to actually land a interview was pretty hard. And I think I was lucky. And also because for us, like international students, it was hard to have like the grace period. Like, you have to get something going right after graduation, or else like you have visa issues and all that.
Yeah. Um, if you were an undergrad at Stanford, or not just Stanford, but I guess doing like university in the Bay Area at all, is it much easier to find internships and stuff through career fairs there versus other places?
Yeah, I would say so because the exposure is like right here. And then I think great thing about Stanford is most of the classes are also project based, especially if you're in engineering. And at the end of the it's quarters, so like at the end of each quarter, you have these project exhibitions, you have the poster sessions, and a lot of the industrial people actually come to take a look. And not like say lucky enough, but like if you're really into that field, you introduce yourself to them, and maybe you'll just land an internship that way instead of going to like the normal career fair or like handing out CVs on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And are you
Yeah.
talking about like the classes that are sponsored by them? Like I know Apple sponsors a ton of Stanford. Uh, yeah. And did you do any of those classes?
Like I did more like the general, so I still focused more on hardware. That's what I was interested in. But I know like there are also like the machine learning classes and all that in general. It was really popular, and I try to just take those classes on the sideline to like understand what's going on. But actually didn't like delve into the details, like study towards that field. Yeah.
Yeah. So what'd you do after doing your internship at Google?
Yeah, so I went back to school to finish my master's, and by then I had two paths. One is I wanted to do a PhD, and that was actually focusing more on the biomedical side. We're doing like artificial retina, but then the professor didn't have the position for me, so I decided to go back to the industry. And then my boss back then, and during the internship, reached out, so I joined Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so what are you doing at Google then?
Yeah, so basically the starter, I didn't have the hardware experiences. I think in terms of hardware, it's different from software. Like hardware, a lot of the knowledge is actually passed down by more senior engineers. So I had a like long learning curve in terms of like getting to understand schematics, system design, and all those different topics. And then I were able to like start designing some of the like the camera systems and stuff, and that turned out to be helpful later on when I joined Waymo. I think that's the core competency that I was trying to build.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
how long was that period where you're kind of just learning and not working on like actual projects yet?
I would say I'm still in that period, to be honest. I've been working for like 7 years right now. I think like this is a vast field and a lot of experienced people. So I think the good thing about like the Google ecosystem is things are really open, like the communications and the things that you can learn from senior engineers and the team members. So and they're willing to share that all these informations and learnings. And so on that basis, I think it's like constant learning every day to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And as kind of further on like how open Google is, I've heard some things about like the hiring culture there and how they like very strongly value if you know someone working at the company or if there's something interesting, like maybe you could teach some sort of class at the company. How does that affect being hired there?
So I say like if you know someone, you can like land an interview, but at the end of the day, it's more like a project fit. And I think software and hardware is also different. For software, it's more like a pool system, and you get like general interview, going to the pool, and then you get selected by managers. But for hardware, it's more role specific, where they're looking for certain roles. Like if you're doing like RF, you're doing like system design, you're doing testings, and you have to make sure that you like the things that you're focusing on is actually a fit for that job in order to even get interviewed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think that makes it especially important for someone in electrical engineering to kind of specialize with the masters?
Yeah, but I also think that at first, like you should stick with like what interests you. Just try, don't like narrow your vision too early in that case. And then I think you can talk to like different industrial people and say like what they actually do day to day, instead of like trying to just Google or guess like what it would be. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think people should kind of narrow down once they do some internships and stuff and like actually work in those fields?
Yeah, so I think this is a good question. Also, like during internship and the start of my career versus now, what I do is actually changing. And the way I did it was during the masters, I didn't actually study much about like system design and circuits, for example. But I think it was the first year when I saw like these systems and schematics, I was like drawn to it. It's like, how did that does that work? And then I saw the end product. It's like really cool. So I try to ask a bunch of people around me that are more senior, like if ultimately in 5 or 7 years, I want to be able to do these kind of stuff. How does that project back to what I'm doing right now, and how do I steer myself towards that direction? And so on at first, I was still doing something that I was familiar with, which is like more signal processing and optics. But at the same time, I try to expose myself into like pluck myself into the projects um, and be like, can you teach me or like can I be part of this? And so I find mentors and they'll teach me like a bunch of knowledge just about like system stuff, and I get to like start from for example testings, and then you get to know more systems, and then you start to read all the data sheets and stuff to get yourself familiarized with it. At the end, like you'll turn into like what you want to be.
Yeah. So for my last question, I wanted to ask if you had one piece of advice for someone who's still in high school or early in college wanting to follow a similar career path as you.
Yeah, I would say you can do like a top down, like a thought process. Say like if I'm like a high schooler and then I see, for example, like the Waymo, which is like what the company that I'm working for, we have like self-driving car on the road, and that interests me. And I start thinking like, okay, so if I were to design this car, I'll break it down into different layers. Start from the software, from the bottom like hardware, how the car works. And so, how does that project back to like my college learnings, even like my high school learnings, and to see like which track I should be focusing more on. But at the same time, do not narrow myself down into just learning like this specific like electrical engineering, for example. I still want to learn about physics. I don't learn about software engineering, or even learn about something that is like business related or even law or something. I think college and high school, the flexibility is something that we should always keep in mind and try to explore and broaden our horizon with.
Yeah. All
Yeah,
right then. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
no problem. Yeah.